local government headquarters, and then Robert Daniel elected on the floor of the House. And I think lawyers always talk about the proceedings, what is required of you. I think once upon a time it used to be the mace. Without this certain things can't happen. Then there was a dispute and positions of the law about that one as well. But the governor, the executive arm of government, appears to have played a particular role because they recognize a group. So what does that do? Does it validate one group and invalidate the other? And others argue, well, even if the governor does that, he is not the law. He is a governor, yes, but the way some of these things play out usually is if a governor recognizes one group, chances are a 90%, if not 99.5%, 99.9% of the time will do everything possible to work with that group that they have recognized. So, while Benway did say last time, we will not interfere, even though he was seated in there, some members thought, your presence is intimidating. If you say you're not going to interfere, you sitting here can be described as such. But in this case, oh dear, I guess we're back to that kind of scenario again. So how will this eventually be sorted?
Well, indeed, rocky start. That's what the report said. That the Benue, the Nasarawa State House of Assembly got up to a rocky start. It's supposed to be a dawn of new beginnings. We did mention highlights yesterday that we will be seeing more and more of this in coming from the state houses of assembly. And we already pointed to the example of how the Reverend Father in Benue says he's not going to interfere. We're saying, okay, maybe because it's first time, or maybe he's trying to do things properly. Who knows? Will his decision pay off? Is he really not interfering? Has it done it behind the scenes? I don't know. But that's what he said. So, you can either take a man by his word or you take him by what it is that he does. But away from that, we also saw in Lagos yesterday the former speaker re-elected as speaker again for a third time running. He's been speaker since 2015, and he was re-elected speaker yesterday. It wasn't so smooth in Nasarawa from what we saw. Initially, they said the clerk had come to the assembly grounds. Members have gotten there very early. It would seem that people already had an idea what was going to happen. So members got there very early in the morning, and then, they met the gates barricaded. They said the clerk had moved the inauguration time owing to security concerns. And then, of course, members weren't having it. They besieged the gates, and it was that it was when they couldn't get past the security agencies that maybe those people decide to go to. But normally what will happen, what should happen, is that there will be an inauguration. The governor of the state has to inaugurate the assembly. It is only after the assembly has been inaugurated, members have taken, maybe they've elected their speaker, then they take an oath of office. So if you were not there at the inauguration of the State House of Assembly, can you validly be a member of the State House of Assembly? I think that lawyers will have, questions to ask. So for those who went to the Ministry of Culture and
Local Government
Affairs, can they be valid members of the State House of Assembly? Don't forget that there's been a scenario like this in Edo State, where the members were inaugurated in the middle of the night, and later on, majority of them couldn't get or refused to recognize a particular inauguration, even though their colleagues were telling them, well, we have been inaugurated, we've taken our oath of office, just come in as ordinary members and come and take your oath of office and resume work. But they refused, saying that they didn't like the clandestine manner in which that inauguration was done. But for the entire duration of that particular house, that was what was obtainable. I mean, those members who were were inaugurated were the ones who took decisions on behalf of, everybody else. And the 17 members, they went to court, they went to the National Assembly, all manner of things were done, but at the end of the day, it would seem that it was those people who were inaugurated by the governor of Edo State who eventually held sway. So how is it going to play out in Nasarawa? It's early days yet, and this is certainly not, a good start. I hope that, there will be a smooth tenor if, the way we're seeing matters in Nasarawa. We know that matters are still in court, even in that state election petition court. So it'll be very interesting to see, but I hope that we don't have too many states who will have this. We know also, just to mention, that the National Assembly will be holding its own valedictory session today. So just to also put it out there, that you should also stay tuned here, because we'll be bringing you at least some excerpts of what will be happening at the valedictory session of the 9th House of Assembly, National Assembly, 9th National Assembly. So all of course in preparation for the inauguration of the 10th National Assembly. But do stay tuned. I don't know how many more states. You want to take a bet, Ayo Abukola, as to how many more states you think will be off to this sort of rocky start?
They will lose money.
Well, I don't want to take a bet on a negative, Mokwe. I'd rather, hope for the best as far as inaugurations are concerned, in the remaining states that we await their state assemblies to be inaugurated. But you're very correct when you say that the courts, are going to have a field day trying to interpret what exactly has happened in this case. Chamberlain was speaking earlier about how lawyers would say, okay, it is that faction or it is the process that has the mace, during its inauguration that is legitimate. And in this case, we recall that, the clerk of the Nasarawa State Assembly had sent out a notice to say that the inauguration of the 7th Assembly had been postponed indefinitely due to security concerns. So how that faction led by the speaker, the former speaker who has now been re-elected by a faction, how they got the mace and were able to use it for that process at the Ministry of Local Government Affairs, it pretty much begs the question. But amid, the conflict and, the tension, the other faction led by the Daniel Ogazi was able to gain entry into the State Assembly complex and was inaugurated by the 12 members elect that were denied access into the Nasarawa State Assembly. So what exactly is going to happen? And more importantly, I think one of the questions we should ask ourselves, that we've asked in the past anyway, is what exactly is at stake? Why the contention? Why, this big fight for offices, for elective offices, and why the conflict? The spirit of democracy is always at hand. And as Margaret spoke earlier on about what happened in Edo State House of Assembly some years back, it was those that were duly inaugurated that then took decisions on behalf of the others who were clandestinely inaugurated. So I think we should reflect on the implications of what these processes, many of them illegitimate, have on the future of governance. And we can talk about the contention for offices when we also look at what's playing out, at the National Assembly level, where different groups emerge canvassing for, certain members-elect from their own region, citing the need for inclusion, the need for balance, and the need, for the party leaders to consider internal democracy. Ayo, I don't know how you're weighing on this.
Well, I'm holding the copy of the New Telegraph this morning. Yeah.
Eventually, we'll hear your views.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Marco was talking about some houses of assembly where they have had it peaceful. In Osun State, a 38-year-old is Speaker of the House of Assembly. But as for Nasarawa State, it's Act 1, Scene 1.
Scene 1.
Chamberlain raised a critical issue. Where is the letter of pronouncement by the governor? Which of those assemblies have been pronounced by the governor? the clerk of the House announced an indefinite suspension of the proceeding. As both of them in Abuja have raised, I think the thing is now going to go back to the court. And we
have the governor receiving the faction of the former speaker who was re-elected.
The court
so
is going to have to intervene on this whole issue, because is there a letter of pronouncement? If there is a pronouncement, where did it happen? And at the end of the day, for me, the most important thing is how do the people benefit from the entire proceedings? If this is getting to such a rocky start, will the aircraft of governance in the state ever really
take off?
Balance? I guess those are the issues that we'll have to look at in the coming days. But in the meantime, Chemelin?
Well, there are aircraft. Nigeria, okay, don't worry. Let's start off with the dailies. We'll talk about that.
No, you didn't go there immediately. No.
After all, I just said he's holding a copy of the paper. And I looked up and I saw a cup of tea I was holding. I didn't see the paper he was holding. So it all depends really on context and perspective. Take a look at Vanguard Newspaper. Today was supposed to be that day, but look at this. Why we shelved planned nationwide strike, ascribed to NLC and TUC. NLC cites mood, stability of nation after general elections, accuses industrial courts of working against workers' interests. We shelved strike because government accepted all our demands, ascribed to TUC. Reps ask FG to implement resolutions. So have we been on this road before? How will these things play out at the end of the day? So if they've accepted all of these demands, what next? So what's the time frame? So some of these things we'll also take you through them. Today, we'll get both gentlemen in here to speak to you on these matters so you can get more clarity. So if you've got questions for them, hey, you can always send them. So this is a big lead on the front page here today. And look at this picture. Moving out, moving on. So some members of the assembly who are not going to be returning, members of the 9th assembly who are not going to be returning to the 10th assembly, moving their things out. So if you were in the National Assembly complex yesterday, you might have seen some of this. But if you were not, here is a picture for you on the front page of Vanguard Newspaper. They're just helping you, letting you see what is going on out there.
Who's wearing a red t-shirt there?
Well, they just need to pick up this paper, and I know they have questions as to, so this property that they move, how is it that they get to move these things? Who does it belong to? How did it get to belong to them if it belongs to them? So for all of that, I think you get answers here. And then, well, there are several things, so I'll just let you go ahead. Oh yeah, Villarreal slap 42 billion. I like how they bring it down to naira. 42 billion naira price tag on Chukwueze. I think it's voted the most valuable or best African player in La Liga, something like that. So very good indeed for footballers and for Nigeria, footballers in Nigeria, Nigerian footballers, as it were. So that's Vanguard today.
Well, take a look at this Nigeria for you, and they have this, talking about aircraft and airplanes. Take a look at this. Nigeria Air is huge scam, NAS declares. Orders immediate suspension of all operations. Urges Tinubu to constitute high-level committee to undertake holistic review. Aviation Ministry. It was only unveiled, not launched. I used to think that you could use them interchangeably. It looks like...
well, you thought wrong.
I actually thought I had a degree in English language. I mean, but right now, okay. I have to question my knowledge of the English language. Aviation Ministry, it was only unveiled, not launched. Excusez-moi, quelle est la différence? What is the difference? God. What? Anyways, page 2 is where you find details. It's not a laughing matter because this is our money. Don't forget that this money is scarce. It is hard
spend to unveil it?
Come by.
So it means, wait, if it was unveiled, not launched, they were supposed to spend another set of much more money to launch?
I don't know, to be honest. I really do not know. I mean, whatever it was that was spent in getting Nigeria Air to bring that plane here, whatever the plans were, the signing of MOUs, the meetings, etc. These are all things that we paid for. Nigerian resources went into it. Our monies went into it. Don't forget that this is a season where we're all being asked to tighten our belts. And it would seem that somebody has just frittered our money away and there is no airline to show for it. But this is the verdict of the National Assembly. It's not my verdict. Nigeria Air is a huge scam, NAS declares. I don't want to believe that they were being frivolous with their comments on this. So I think we should flip to page 2 and ask big questions of our, a former minister and perhaps even of the president. Now, did you really preside over this? Page 2 is where you find details. You have a number of other stories there. After paying 6 million naira, Atiku laments not receiving many exhibits from INEC. Obi, Labour Party, tender more documents in evidence at tribunal. The story is on pages 12 and 14 for you. You also have a number of other stories just beside the picture. You see the experts to Tinubu review security strategy, reduce reliance on Interpol. Nigeria's economy to grow by 2.8% in 2023, attributed to the World Bank. Well, we hope that we do better than that and that the growth is inclusive this time around, whatever growth it is that we record. But looking at the picture there, something certainly to celebrate is the, the inauguration of the Institute of Human Virology here in Abuja. You have to really celebrate what bakers are also doing with cakes these days. I mean, take a look at that picture. They're cutting a cake and it's the exact replica of the model of the institute here in Abuja. Let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
And turn our attention very quickly to the Daily Trust newspaper, and it chooses to focus on subsidy removal. Take a look at the headlines. Subsidy removal, artisans, business owners accuse NLC, TUC of selling out. Take a look at the writers. CSOs, NOC unions want other Nigerians covered. Why we suspended strike, Labour? Well, we're going to be asking that question a lot on the program later on today and be getting more answers. Well, fear of business loss looms. That's ascribed to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Civil society leaders, activists to go ahead with mass protests. Well, we'll see how that plays out. All of that you'll find on pages 4 and 26 of the Daily Trust. But go above the nameplate now. Of course, there are other things happening besides, the continuing conversation on subsidy removal. Presidential Tribunal adjourns over INEC's failure to supply PDP materials. The other party, too, the LP, is also speaking in the same vein, had been speaking in the same vein in the last couple of days. We'll see how that plays out when the tribunal continues sitting today. Reps declare Nigeria Air launch fraud. Want officials involved prosecuted. And I also recall both houses, both chambers condemning the role of Ethiopian Airlines in the launch on May the 29th, saying that the aircraft, demonstrated for the launch, only for the aircraft to return as soon as the launch was over. So the unveiling and launch, Ayo, over to you now. What's the difference as we wrap up on Daily Trust newspaper?
Well, maybe Daily Independent has more on that word this morning, because that's the lead of the paper as well, and this is the way Daily Independent looks at that story this morning. Reps want officials involved in unveiling Nigeria Air prosecuted. 1 FG over costs of terminating 10 million. I believe that should be 10 million naira or 10 million e-passports contract, whichever it is. The details you'll find on the inside pages. What's interesting is also what we understand that is it interim or acting MD of Nigeria Air allegedly said, or whether it was a record of video that That aircraft was...
if we could just go over what he said. What was done on May the 29th was to reconcile what we had initially seen about Nigeria Air earlier on, just to show pictures, which didn't make sense because, then the Senate, one of the senators on the committee reminded him that, look, Nigeria Air had been launched in Fambro, some years back. So what exactly was done and what was the role of Ethiopian Airlines in the entire process?
So this one was unveiled. That was the launch. This was an unveiling. Pick one. Okay. Anyway, the details you'll find on the inside pages of the paper, and right under that picture on the front page of the executive and the legislature in a handshake in Lagos State. It seems is it a finale has come to this controversial water resources bill? Senate rejects controversial national water resources bill. The details you find on the inside pages of the paper this morning. This is rather interesting one. I don't know how many people feel about it, but then it says Senate okayed Tinubu's request to appoint 20 special advisors, and the story says the list of the advisors is not included, yet it was okayed. Okay. That's my own okay to Daily Independent this morning.
Well, let's try this then. New Telegraph. 10th NAS. Akpabio's faith uncertain as Tinubu breaks speakership impasse. So, there you go. I always tell you these things. You never can tell really as they turn out. Stakes to Northwest may unveil dark horse Jaji Thursday. Met Gagdi, Soli, others at State House yesterday. Wasi Abbas to get ministerial slots. So it doesn't mean they will be the ones who will be there. So maybe they might say, okay, you know what? All right, we'll give you the slot. Bring your person if you want to. Do with it what you will. That kind of thing. Probably. Could be wrong though. Why Akwa Ibom ex-governor may lose colleagues' support. It's all here for you. And then speaking about the legislature, just right beside her, 38-year-old emerges Osun's 8th Assembly Speaker. As Lagos legislators re-elect Obasa for third successive time, the Bayelsa counterparts voting Ngombera again, while the Nasarawa counterparts are on the rocky starts. That interpretation mine. Okay, and then about this other matter, subsidy crisis, fuel pump price may hit 530 naira in Lagos. Then we'll just say other states might just tell Lagos, welcome to the club. Because they are currently, I think the price band was 488 per litre. Some other states 540, 547 thereabout, 515. And then it says it's also rising in other states as truckload of PMS rises by 175% to 22.3 million naira. Industrial court favored FG at workers' detriment, ascribed to NLC, says it complied with court ruling to show government merits of obeying laws. CTA demands proper use of $800 million World Bank loan. You have a lot of that here this morning. That's New Telegraph.
The Guardian is the next one here, and look at the elite story. They're focusing on energy for you. Unreliable grid, alternative energy spike borrowing costs by 50%. The story is on page 6 of the paper. When they talk about energy now, it's not just fuel. But look at that: diesel, gas, and then electricity.
I thought those
are the things.
Price of gas
has come down. Yes, indeed. That was, but maybe this figure, which is recorded here, was before the drop was recorded. Don't forget that some of these stories, they're like special reports, and they might have been working on it. Maybe this would be the average. So it can go up to come down, but if you tally the average for a certain period, you might find that on average it's been higher than what you've noticed in the previous year. yes, 2023 is not ended yet, but so far so good. What has been its average as compared to, say, 2022? So it's still diesel, for instance, from what you can see here. In 2021, it was 7 million to buy 33,000 liters. In 2022, it went up to, you can imagine, from 7 million to 26 million naira. Wow. And then in 2023, it has come down to 20 million. So last year, you do know that, employers of labor and business owners were crying because the way the cost of diesel spiked was something unprecedented. But they're tabling that for you on Reliable Grid. Alternative energy spike borrowing costs by 50%. You also find this, CSO's knock NLC for suspending strike. E-hailing drivers down tools, shut down apps. I'm not going to give any comment on that. Page 6 is where you'll find details because the comment I have on my tongue is not so kind. But look at the bottom here. Daily Times ex-editor Peter Pan and Nahoro for burial in UK today. Once again, may his soul rest in peace. And then police probe assassination of UI professor. Yeah, a professor was said to have been murdered sometime this week. And the police has started the probe investigation into his murder. International body decries poaching as Nigeria loses 2,998 nurses to the UK. So oftentimes when we talk about brain drain, we often refer to doctors. What about nurses? Look at that. Almost 3,000 nurses to the United Kingdom. Usually when I hear poaching, though, I always imagine it in relation to animals or eggs. But this time around, it's in relation to human resources, which we must guard very jealously. They also have following up for you on the case in court, the Election Petition Tribunal, particularly the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Controversy trails obese parley with Labour Party lawmakers over National Assembly leadership. The story is also on page 3 of the paper. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
Turn our attention to Leadership newspaper, and it also leads, with that big matter at the heart of the polity at this point in time. Take a look at this. Subsidy removal. Tinubu will mitigate hardship. Labour assures Nigerians. And take a look at the riders. Explains suspension of planned strike. Decries abuse of ex parte motion by courts. As APC slams NLC TUC with 1.7 billion naira suit over flight disruptions. Looks like Labour has a lot more on its plate, but the subsidy removal and the consequent price adjustment on the pump price of fuel, maybe having more implications, than we thought of. Yesterday we were talking about a particular state that had reduced the number of work days. It looks like another state is following suit, from yesterday's report. Much later on, Edo State increases a minimum wage, but also reduces the number of work days to about 3 or 4. While increase in minimum wage to 40,000 naira is cheery, but what about the reduction in the number of work days, which also means a reduction in productivity of the civil service workforce?
Well, maybe not really a reduction in productivity. Question I just want to ask is, what are the strategies they will in place to ensure that it's not taken undue advantage of by their own people? I remember the Kwara example, I think it was the PERMSEC of one ministry there was saying, look, we're going to make our monitoring processes more stringent. But hey, it's public service. General notion that people have is they don't really do much anyway. But it now behoves on the civil servants themselves who've been given this privilege to find a way around it and ensure that they don't take undue advantage. They have the responsibility. Well, the only business they can do is in agriculture. Are they going to take advantage of that? I don't know.
Well, the wage bill, as you say, must be justified. Civil servants must not take undue advantage, of the reduction in the number of work days. But the reality of spending a lot of that 40,000 naira on transportation to work every day is dawning on, the workforce. Take a look at this one. 10th NAS, fresh crisis over move to replace Abbas. Interesting. So it's taking on the election of key leaders in the National Assembly is taking on a new dimension. And lastly, INEC approves final list of Bayelsa, Kogi, Imo governorship candidates. So while one electoral process has been concluded, our eyes are now on the off-cycle elections. Let's leave it there for Leadership Newspaper.
Nigerian News Direct has about 4 or 5 headlines. Well, let's take maybe 1 or 2 front page and look at it. Now, Nigerian Air is what it's on the front page. Reps declare 14.6 billion naira Nigeria Air launch of fraud. That sounds like calling for a probe of 14.6 billion naira. Aircraft bearing Nigeria Air logo chartered from Ethiopian airline. According to official, find the details of that on page 2, among several other stories you'll find on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. That's the Nigerian News Direct, and bringing to a close a look at some of the headlines on today's papers. We're back right after now to begin to take on the issues as they arise. Do stay with us.
From the time I was a member of Jonathan's economic management team, I have consistently maintained that we need to remove subsidy, because for me it's organized crime. People were just stealing the resources of the country, and that crime has to stop. And I showed my own position in empirical data to show that the amount of fuel we consume is totally far ahead what we're supposed to consume. I showed it in data, comparing with countries like Pakistan, and it's very clear. So I maintained about its removal. The difference is that I believe it should be removed with conditions, and that condition has to be applied. If I was involved, I would have shown in empirical statistical data how much we are going to save, where we are going to apply it, the gains for the people, so they can, just like I said all throughout my campaign.
Welcome back. Well, yes, it may be a never-ending debate, this fuel subsidy matter, depending on how it goes. I mean, we use this product every single day of our lives. Well, yes, we've got both persons you've seen there joining us this morning to weigh in on the current matter. Honorable Nkoyo Toyo is the chief spokesperson and co-convener, Labour and Civil Society Front. She's a former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia, a former member of the House of Representatives. And sitting beside her, Dr. Diakpo Obire, member of the APC and President, Good Leadership Advocacy for Africa. Thank you both and good morning for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with you, Honourable, but not on this fuel subsidy matter. The House, the National Assembly, they'll be having valedictory session. The reps today, Senate much later, and of course there'll be the proclamation, which will happen then the 10th Assembly. But at the moment, there's this back and forth as to the leadership. How will they emerge? Who will they be? So given all that is playing out, should Nigerians bother about any of these scenarios as they play out?
It's a good question, actually. When you think about the way the National Assembly itself works, the inside workings of that body, in the end, really, the business of the National Assembly is about the business of the National Assembly and the way it operates. Oftentimes, they look behind or look over their shoulders to see what government is doing and to sort of work closely with government. And the point you make about should the Nigerian people be concerned, to the extent that the Nigerian people want to see the holding of governments more accountable for the things they do. One of the areas which I think over time the National Assembly hasn't done work sufficiently around is the issue of oversight. How do we hold government? I mean, I was just listening to you before I came on screen talk about the scandal with the
Nigeria
Air. Question is, how did we wait until we got to this point? This thing was announced, the Nigeria Air was announced, I think in the first 4 years of Buhari or something like that. And monies were allocated in the budget, of which the budget we in the National Assembly knew everything about. So the point about it is back to where the Nigerian people come in. What the Nigerian people want to see is a more assertive National Assembly, not one that is being dragged around by the executive. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with the assertion of the rights and voices. And to that extent, therefore, let the leadership be a function of the capacities of those who you bring on board to be able to ask the questions which they need to ask in due season.
I hear some of your colleagues argue that they say citizens often perhaps interchange assertion and being confrontational with holding government accountable. So for you, where do we draw the line?
Again, go back to the Air Nigeria case. I mean, it's better to work with the tangibility of something you can deal with. How accountable were they? To what extent did they ask the right questions? This was a budgeted activity. To what extent did they? And then at the end of your 4 years, you call it a scam, you call it a fraud. Where were you? Excuse me. I guess this tells the story. It tells the story to the Nigerian people, and of course you will see that in almost every aspect of what we are talking about today, where we continue to see a failure on the part of the National Assembly. And I hope the 10th Assembly, given the contestations that are going on in terms of where the leadership emerges and who becomes the leader of both chambers, we will begin to see an understanding and a realization that there is also so much that government itself can do to determine for that body where it goes with its business.
Well, Dr. Berry, you could respond much later if you will, but let me get on to the fuel subsidy matter, because right now, of course, there will always be different perspectives. Should we? How should we, if we have to? What do you make of where we are on this matter right now?
I think we need to lay certain things down. Should we? It's no longer the option. It's no longer a question. I don't think there is anywhere you go into in Nigeria today and people will say, oh, keep subsidy in the form that it is. I mean, I need to make the point, in the form that it is. And I think that is the anxiety of which anybody coming to this government would have in trying to deal with a problem that has become, over time, endemic. It's not the first time government has tried to take the subsidy out of the regime of things that it's doing. It's got a long history. I was serving on the Mantle Cushioning and Palliative Committee when Obasanjo was president, so I'm not a visitor to this journey. And the process of uncoupling, that whole process had started right from the time of Obasanjo, with very extensive efforts at having a situation which addressed the needs of a broader section of Nigerians. It has always been the question of how do you do it without creating a lot of harm and a lot of hurt. That has always been the question. But the newer question that has arisen from all that we have seen over time is that what is subsidy? Whenever we talk about subsidy, we're talking about PMS. But like Falman said on your channel the other day, subsidy is much more than PMS. So If subsidy is gone, I would like to have a further understanding of the pronouncement and proclamation made by Mr. President that subsidy is gone, because I want to understand, is it just the PMS subsidy or the many other subsidies where we see AMCOM and other establishments of government coming to support private businesses and keeping them afloat in order as to create some equilibrium in terms of the pricing that exists in the system. But let me say what we, the civil society groups, have come to place on the table. We are saying that subsidy, yes, as it relates to PMS and as it relates to every other fraud and scams, and I'm not using my language, I'm using the language of the Vice President, who said that there is a cartel, a very dangerous cartel. He's pointed to the problem. The problem is the cartel. The problem are the people who have refused to make these things accessible. In the first place, we always knew that the idea of a subsidy was to keep prices at a certain level and make them affordable to the generality of people. At what point did we stop being a caring country in which the moment we wanted to deal with the problem of the economy, we went for the weakest link? And then we are saying, to hell with the market women. I'm happy the first daughter is the president of all market women. She hasn't sat down to tell us Nigerian women in the markets what's going to happen to the cost of food with the changes in the prices. Who's going to bear the cost? How is it going to impact? These are the questions which we have not yet heard. You put a proclamation before you then begin to think of the content. I've seen the TUC NLC agreement. It doesn't concern those of us who are sitting in the market and trying to buy food. In where are the parameters where the rest of community and society, who are those labor is negotiating for? If less than 10% of the Nigerian population are in organized labor. So what happens to the rest of Nigerians? I am a woman. I am a woman of a certain demography in Nigeria. Most women of my age who have finished work as civil servants have not collected their gratuity, they have not collected their pensions, they don't have access. What is the market going to mean? What is the cost of livelihood going to mean to them? We must be a country that cares for its citizens. The fact that you attack the very element that speaks to the citizens first, and you want to make the citizens pay for a fraud that has been perpetrated. You haven't even touched the fraudulent actors. You haven't even asked questions. How did they come up with their prices, for instance?
So, Dr. Berry, and do you consider those valid asks?
Chamberlain, you see, when you talk about the issue of subsidy, it's a very serious issue. Now, this is one fear that the Nigerian people and even the government have been facing over the years. It's been decades, right from the time of the military till now. Our oils have been stolen. Subsidy came to be. Government is trying their best to see what they can do to make life easy for the citizenry. But unfortunately, we have a group of people who just feel that this is an opportunity to enrich themselves. And the creation of that subsidy payment is the reasons why you see a lot of corruption and a lot of fraudulent activities around this whole exercise. Without subsidy, you can't hoard your product. Without subsidy, you cannot divert product. Without subsidy, you cannot organize yourselves in a way that you start having different figures flying everywhere. NNPC will tell you we have 98 million liters according to what the custom said sometime last year, that 98 million liters is being consumed by Nigerians daily. And the Nigerian mainstream and downstream regulatory agency counters that figure last year and said it is 66.8 million liters that Nigerian consumes. So the question is, why are we having these figures? It's because people are gaining from it. People are eating from it. So you cannot actually say today that this is the right figure that the Nigerian people consume of PMS daily. But as it is, May 29th, 2023, came a new Nigeria, which simply means the pronunciation of the president simply shows that we have come to reality. We have come to terms with reality that our lifestyle can no longer be sustained by the government. I am buying fuel 195 naira as at.
Yeah, but civil society are asking, yes, they're not opposed, quite a number of people, not opposed to removal of subsidy. But the question is, has government told us, for instance, how much are we saving? What are we going to do with this? Who are the people responsible for all of these things? Shouldn't the president or somebody in government be talking to Nigerians about all of this?
Now, there's something you must know. If you start running around a hole, then you are not serious about solving a problem. Now the president took the boldness and said, this fear, I'm taking it off today. Not because he just wants to put pains upon Nigerians, but he made it clear before he even made the pronunciation that the budget he inherited, there is no provision for subsidy. Now, with that, is a stepping stone to his pronunciation. And be that as it may, the people, like the civil society, what they are talking about is right. But the issue is, you cannot take away the pain before treatment. You have to remove that pain, that thing that is paining you. You take it off, then you now start the treatment. Now, I want to say that many Nigerians are too quick to start complaining about this. We are all facing this. Let's be realistic. This is total and final removal, that is a full deregulation of the downstream sector. Now, the prices, there will be opportunity. The market is open right now. It's an open market. So investors can come in. If you want to import fuel, you import fuel. Now, the government... You
didn't answer the question.
No, the government, I'm coming there. The government is... I
thought you said if we're going around the holes, we'll be...
Listen, the government is putting in place what will cushion the effect down. Right now, negotiations are going on between the government, NLC, like...
So they remove the subsidy bill, then much later again, you start thinking about what you're going to put in place.
No. Listen to me.
I thought that's what you said.
No, listen to me very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. If you don't take away the pain, you can't solve it. So the monies that are going to be saved from subsidy are going to be put into things that will further cushion the effects on the people. This is what government is trying to do. We have been painting it all this while. We painted subsidy with Shopee, we painted subsidy with NAPEP, we painted subsidy with traders' money, money transfer, but there's no result.
So what is government going to do now?
Now, there's a possibility of making things work.
Possibility?
Yes, possibility, 100% of making things work for Nigerians. Salaries are going to be increased. The wages are going to be increased. And that is the discussion that is going on between...
Nobody has told me my salary will be increased.
Yes. Timberland, let's not go there. But let me whilst, your analogy about pain and treatment might be valid, people will tell you that oftentimes when you go to a doctor, they will tell you about a treatment plan. They will tell you what they're about to do. They'll tell you of your patient. This is a diagnosis. This is how we intend to go about it. We'll have a surgery. Of course, you will be in pain after surgery, and then they will give you pain meds, etc., etc. And they will tell you there will be a plan before treatment or surgery or whatever it is commences. That's what usually happens. In this case, it hasn't happened. In this case, surgery has just been done, perhaps even without anesthesia. The question now is, what exactly is the plan? What was the plan all along for treatment? That's the question that Nigerians are asking. What did this government have in place? That it seems to have done this without a concrete plan in place to tell the people what next. What next?
Okay. Now, you talked about a surgery, a painful surgery.
No, it was you who talked about it.
No, you talked about a painful surgery.
I'm building on your analogy.
No, you also need to understand that when a surgery is conducted, before it's conducted, there are diagnoses, right? And for you to know what exactly is wrong with the patient. Now, we understand what is wrong with Nigeria economy, revenues, and all that. We are taking it out. Then it takes time for you. These are not things you buy off the shelf. You cannot say the solution is going to be buy off the shelf. So the government is putting in place gradually things that we just came in. The government just came in. It's barely a week. So certainly plans are going on as we speak.
So the plans are coming after?
Exactly. They are going to come after.
Let me come to you, ma'am. You have also admitted that there were no easy answers. We've been here way too long. We knew what the problem was. We knew what the solution needed to be, but governments have been reluctant because they know that the solutions were not going to be easy. Given where we are, right now we knew that we're also in dire straits. If we were to go by the words of the GCEO of the NNPC, we have been borrowing, we have been in deficit to funding subsidy. Did we really have the luxury of time to say, oh, let us sit and wait and plan something, knowing that marketers could begin to hoard this product and refusing to sell because they know that imminently subsidy was going to go anyways?
Thank you. You make a good point, absolutely. It just takes me back to the point that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, made at the end of his tenure in government, where he said, by my winning an election or some, I don't have the exact words here, it's not worth the loss of any life, not. The point is, this is going to hurt Nigerians very, very badly. Very, very badly. People are eking a living already. Terribly. And this is like almost 175% increase from what you read in one of the newspapers this morning. The same newspaper you read this morning says Lagos has moved from 488 to 530 just this morning. Do Nigerians deserve, ordinary Nigerians, of which 133 million of them live in multi-dimensional poverty, do they deserve this? Somebody else scams you at another level, then you make another person pay for that scam. What we are paying for as a country is not the problem of subsidy as a strategy. It's the problem of the scam that has been layered on subsidy. You have a strategy. Let me tell you something. When you change and say, okay, no longer, and you are replacing it, first of all, most of the actors who will be involved in that replacement plan are almost the same people who had been involved in the scam itself. So you are replacing one problem with another problem because you haven't touched the problem that created the scam in the subsidy.
Yeah, but we've seen attempts to touch that problem. I mean,
what is the attempt? If you ask me,
let me start with. I mean, I didn't follow very closely what the Obasanjo government tried to do. What we saw was that the most it could do was reduce the amount it was paying on subsidy by increasing the price of fuel, and even that was met with stiff resistance. The first time perhaps we saw that government tried to take it away, or let me say I saw, was in 2012 during the Jonathan administration when it tried to remove subsidy. There was a big campaign across the country. We remember then the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Petroleum Resources, the Governor of the Central Bank holding parleys with organized private sector, justifying why subsidy had to go. Eventually, it was removed without ceremony. I think it was the 1st of January 2012 when subsidy was removed, and people took to the streets. There was Occupy Nigeria protests, and in response to that, the National Assembly decided to take it upon itself to hold a probe. For months in front of national television, we saw marketers being invited, and this, the claims that they had been scrutinized in an attempt to tackle the corruption. We eventually saw what happened with that. Even members of the National Assembly didn't appear to be sincere, as the chairman of that committee eventually went down for fraud. But nonetheless, the meat of what it was that they came up with, the investigations which were conducted, were there for all to see. It still did not solve the problem of the corruption. It has continued unabated as we speak. The NNPC says we're owing it 2.3 trillion naira. So the question is, did we really have the luxury of time to continue to say, let us plan a phased removal of subsidy, looking at just the response of marketers a day after the president made his speech about subsidy being gone and the immediate hoarding of this product?
What I hear you saying is that we have the luxury to continue with corruption. I'm sorry, that's the way I hear it. My point here is that it is not the ordinary Nigerian who has less than 20,000 naira a month who is the one to pay for this. If they must pay for it, they must know why they are paying for it. As it is, they don't know why. You have a template that says pay 500, pay 488, pay whatever. Nobody has sat down to say, if you pay this 500 naira, 200 of it is going to go directly back to you. That's why you are being asked to pay. And then they can see how they are getting benefits from what they are losing and being made to pay for. You see, the problem in the country right now is that what the new Nigeria, as he calls it, has told us is that the people don't matter. Because you went for the easiest and the cheapest option, which was punish the people. Everything else that has cost the subsidy, everywhere in the world, subsidy is used. Everywhere. Nigeria continues. When we finish with the PMS subsidy, they're going to see subsidy in agriculture, the scams that are going on in several other subsidy sites. Elena was here on your television and talked about it. We are delaying the point in question. Nigeria is a crime scene where crime is happening at every point in time. What I expect Mr. President to tell us is, how are we going to deal with the perpetrators?
So I also recall, just before we go to Lagos, I know my colleagues are waiting, but we also saw the prosecution of marketers. I think is very important. Some marketers were prosecuted. I think one or two, went to jail for it, or maybe they did a plea bargain, but it didn't stop the fraud. It would seem that nobody learned anything.
So there's no new Nigeria.
So
the old Nigeria.
It didn't stop the fraud. So really, I do not know. You asked the question, when did we become a country that stopped caring? And the question is at all levels. As individuals, as corporates, as government officials, that question will be valid all around, because even with the prosecution of people, it didn't seem to stop the fraud. So looking at where we currently are, you have also said the question is not about whether subsidies should go. It's about how it should go. So Do we really have the luxury? That's the question I'm asking. Did we have the luxury of time to plan? That's the question I'm asking you, Mom.
Well, that takes you back to the point which everybody's making, that the decision. First of all, when Buhari left, he said this will run until the end of June. So everybody expected that subsidy will go by July. Now we hear that he left without leaving money to cover the subsidy for June or whatever. I mean, we're just reading about these things. We're just hearing about these things. Why should we believe the things we just hear, by chance? We need to hear from government in a formal and proper manner what exactly is going on.
All right,
and we haven't heard it.
Okay, let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos. They've got questions for you. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me begin with Dr. Obiri. Perhaps one of the major challenges a number of people will have, as you've heard the ambassador speak about, is in the mode of communicating whatever policy government has to its people all across the length and breadth of the country. As she said as well, just about 10% of the workers of Nigerians are recognized in the organized private sector. But here we are in a situation where 90% of others, informal sector mostly, rural areas and all of those people, they have to bear the same consequence as those people in urban Nigeria. So in terms of communication, the deed has been done. Efforts have been made all across to ensure that things stabilize some way or the other. But how should we be communicating this to Nigerians in a way that they will accept this, what government calls temporary pain, for a better future?
Thank you very much for this question. But first, I want to respond to what she said earlier. Yes, this is a new Nigeria. Reality has come to be, and we cannot take that away at this point. If there are two ways here that we are going to treat this issue of subsidy removal on the effects of cushioning it. One, the Nigerian populace, the Nigerian citizen has a role to play, because if you actually take analysis, or you go around and take statistics, you will see that we spend more on what we don't need. We need to differentiate our wants from our need. That is on the Nigerian citizens. You need to know how to manage the little resources you have, because we spend so much on waste. Then two, the government is doing their best. As the government just come to be, and plans are on the way. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is someone that has so much passion for the Nigerian people, and is doing everything possible to see that these things are taken care of. Now, coming to the area of the information you mentioned, yes, the government is barely a week old, so we should not just start blaming or start accusing the government of not informing the people rightly and all that. The government is still forming. It's just sitting. The National Assembly is about to be inaugurated. Then it can settle well to address various challenges, economic challenges, security challenges, and all that. Because the subsidy is like what is closer to us. That is why we feel it so much. They said in the spiritual realm, there are so many forces, but the witchcraft is closer to human being. So you are more afraid of the witch.
As much as that is easy to understand, the issues, what you have raised, my apologies, what you have raised, as significant as that is, there are a number of people who will wonder, well, the government didn't settle in before announcing that subsidy is gone. And now Nigerians have to settle in to that challenge. So the understanding that Madam is asking for, I think is very important for people to buy into it and as many appeals have been made, support government. But let me come to Madam Koyoto. You know, there's this report out there from KPMG that says, in response to the PMS subsidy removal by government, pump prices in the Republic of Benin almost doubled from 450 CFA to 800 CFA, underscoring the widespread belief that significant quantities of subsidized PMS were smuggled out of Nigeria into neighboring countries, also underscoring that statement by the president that he's not going to pay for the fuel use in other countries at the expense of Nigerians. How do you factor that sacrifice, so to speak, into the scheme of things now? Because the black market in these other countries close to Nigeria are thriving at the expense of Nigeria. How do you reconcile that with the issues we're having on our hands?
Oh, absolutely. I don't see a contradiction at all. This is a country that has managed 2 exchange rates. Remember, we have the official exchange rate and the non-official exchange rate. The opportunity that exists, again, remember, we're not saying that we shouldn't remove the PMS. We're saying that the implications of removing should have been thought about and thought through before the actual removal. And that the implications of what has happened and that pronouncement is that this is a policy that doesn't care about the citizens of the country. It's taken a position which will hurt and damage a lot of households. I mean, you must remember again that this is coming on the back of COVID that decimated a lot of businesses, coming on the back of the currency swap, the failed currency swap that affected several more businesses, and now you have this. So a lot of small businesses are going to either just disappear or become non-existent because of these badges that have happened in the last couple of months. So back to the point about what's happening in the neighboring country. It's an opportunity. It's absolutely an opportunity. And in terms of being an opportunity, it doesn't stop you from having 2 regimes. Monies that oil that is going across the border has to cost more. Let the neighboring countries pay more. I still think it is a function of government to be able to do so. I mean, part of what we should be doing, and that comes to things like the stolen oil theft and all sorts of things, you know. There's so many things going on there, none of which we've talked about. How do we deal with the supply end that will crash the price of the commodity? So the point I'm making in question is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with neighboring countries having to pay more. Citizens of this country are citizens primarily, and what affects us should not be judged on the basis of what is happening across the border. The business of what is happening across the border is the business of what is happening across the border. We must have ways in which government deals with that, because that is smuggling. That is smuggling, and somebody is enabling that. If that wasn't being enabled, we wouldn't have that situation. What we are saying is, what is the story for your citizens? And I hear you talk about communication. I'm sorry to differ. This subsidy is going to enter every household. Every household is going to feel the impact of it. It's not a communication thing. It is something that will hurt and hurt families badly.
So CSO is going to protest since Labour has put it on hold for now?
Well, what we are saying to the country is that what we've seen come out of the negotiations that have taken place in the last couple of days between the TUC and the NLC doesn't cover the rest of us. It only talks about what the organized labor wants to see. Of course, we're making a demand and we're asking. We're being sensitive to the fact that something has to happen, and hopeful that these negotiations that will go on will open the door for many more actors. I would like to sit with the daughter of the president to ask her what's going to happen to the market women, for example. That's an important negotiation that needs to happen.
All right, Honorable Nkoto, Chief Spokesperson, Co-Convener, Labour and Civil Society Front, former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia and former member of the House of Representatives, along with Dr. Odiapo Obire, member of the APC and President, Good Leadership Advocacy for Africa. Thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you.
We will continue our conversation on this same subject matter. We've got 2 of those persons who are leading negotiations on the other side. We'll talk about that in a moment. Stay with us.
Yes, who is there?
Oh boy, open oh, it's me, JJ.
My brother, how far now?
Bros, is it true that the price of petrol has gone up again? Food and electricity are expensive. Now I'm hearing that fuel too has increased.
Why now? JJ, don't let anybody confuse you, please. The regulation of the price of petrol means the market is now open for healthy competition. The price could go up or down. It all depends on the market forces.
The price will still go up again?
Not like that. The federal government spends over 400 million naira monthly on fuel subsidy. And with this deregulation, that money will be used for other important things like infrastructure and education. This competition will reduce the price in the long run.
Are you serious?
Yes, now. You see how SIM cards are now affordable to all? That's how petrol will be too. NMDPRA will not allow Nigerians to be exploited unjustly. Now, go out there and spread the good news.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA.
Hi, I'm Pato Rankin, and they don't call me World Best for no reason. I only deal with the best. Be it auto or business, 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to World Class Insurance Services. We are Anchor Insurance, where insurance truly works.
Oh, I wish you were here.
I'm always with you.
But it's not the same without you.
MTN 5G's amazing technology will change how we experience life and the internet. Get ready to encounter the incredible. And remember, no be juju, na MTN 5G.
New beginnings are always colorful. When we celebrate the start of life's journey, we marry in colors. With our proudly Nigerian Dulux paints, now available in any color. Express your world however you want it. Visit a Dulux Color Center to get any color instantly. Dulux, let's color.
Right, welcome back. We've got Festus Osifo, President of Trade Union Congress, and Pengerson here in the studios. And then we've got Comrade Joe Ajero, President of Nigeria Labour Congress, joining us virtually. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, Comrade Ajero, let me start with you on this matter. Today was supposed to be that day, but there are several perspectives that is out there this morning concerning why the protest or the strike was shelved. So if you could just tell us what is the, if there's anything as the main reason why this is not going ahead today.
Well, the reasons are out there in the media on why the action was suspended. Clearly, we had a meeting Sunday that government procured an ex parte order. As flawed as that order would look like, we needed to prove to government that that will obey government, will obey court order. We needed to prove to government that we will follow the rule of law in all its ramifications, despite its shortcomings. Because on the day they invited us for a negotiation by 4 p.m., the government had already gone to an industrial court, with the plaintiffs as the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. For any lawyer or any judge to accept Minister of Justice as a plaintiff in a case like this is flawed in all its ramifications. And we looked at it, and they even gave an order, sent 3 trucks of police men to come and paste that order at our office. Now, it is only when somebody refuses to take service that you can go back to the same court to get an order for substituted service. But this one, as it was being pronounced, they just brought it, and pasted it anywhere. But that's not even the issue. The issue is that despite that, we still went ahead to hold negotiations with government. And to us, if what we have agreed on are religiously implemented, Nigeria will be the best for it. We may differ, on the issue of implementation, on the issue of how Nigerians perceive it. But one thing that is clear is that the issue of subsidy, the issue of pump price of PMS has become a recurring decimal in Nigeria. Each time government announces a figure and we negotiate, they remove 50 naira or 20 naira or 30 naira, they will still tell you they are still subsidizing with 50 naira or 20 naira. But we now went for an alternative. We went for that alternative which will serve the better interests of Nigerians, not just the working class. If we had wanted to go for the issue of the working class on their benefit, we would have gone on only wage review and minimum wage review, which was the carrot, that the president was flying with a group of governors, the same governors who have not been able to pay minimum wage. We were talking of wages. We didn't want to fall for it. So that was why we had a holistic approach on the agreement we signed. And we had to suspend an action for 10 days since we are meeting again on the 19th, the same day the court adjourned, for sitting.
All right, comrade, there's an account that says, quote, TUC, saying this was also suspended because government had met all the demands of TUC. Is that correct?
No. Government have not met all the demands of TUC, but when we first met with them on I think on Sunday, so we gave them the shopping list. So when we gave them the demands, they said, okay, they would take it, internalize it, and they will give a response to it. So to say government has met all the demand, no. Meeting demands means when there's an agreement. So there's no agreement, talk less of them implementing. It's until they agree and implement that we could say that they have met the demand. But as it is today, what has happened is that we gave them a list, we read through it, we discussed them, so they accepted that, okay, they will go back, they will look at it, and that will now form. If you look at the communique that was signed, the number 7 said that government is going to assess the demand from TUC. So during that meeting, that is when the holistic review will now be done. Yeah.
Well, let me go back to Comrade Ajero. I'm very surprised that you say that it was because of the court order that Labour decided to shelve its strike. I was under the impression, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, my impression was wrong, was that there had been a conversation. I mean, you were at that meeting, and perhaps it was owing to some, negotiation that had gone on, that had, Labour had seen reason to shelve its strike, not because of a court order. Was that correct? I mean, I assume that government had gone to court in the event that they were not able to convince Labour, or persuade it to shelve a strike on Wednesday. Wasn't that what transpired?
Well, Well, if you look at it from the point of this or that, neither this nor this, you'll be giving the analysis. But I know that my explanation was that we went for an alternative instead of the recurring decimal of increase, reduced by this, reduced by that. And that we got that alternative on ground. And that we got other demands, an agreement that by 19th, we'll look at the mode of implementation. With the technical committee, I equally mentioned to you that even before we went for that meeting, that government has brought an order. But that didn't stop us from going into a meeting with them, and ABCD were the things we got, and on the basis of that, we suspended an action, not called off, for a meeting to be held on the 19th. I didn't say that it was principally because of the court order. I gave it as a narrative based on the question, posed to me on what happened and what transpired all this while. And that was bringing up the issue of government and going to court as trying to dialogue in bad faith, that it wasn't in good faith, and the position of the court of weaponizing the issue of ex parte, trying to use a backhand, trying to use a shortcut that does not serve any good, that is not credible in a democratic dispensation. It was on that premise that I drew that analogy of the court and what transpired, and to show you that, despite this is what we got, and we are continuing by 19th of June.
All right, then. I'm a little curious. So this negotiation is going to go on the 19th of June, you have said. But so far, we're yet to see the list of demands that NLC, that's the Nigeria Labour Congress, is putting on the table. Or is it aligning with the demands that has been made by the Trade Union Congress?
Well, the meeting that produced that agreement was a meeting with the NLC. The TUC met with government on Sunday, and on Monday, the NLC met with government. And all the items there, though they may coincide with what the TUC sent, we have proposals and the list from the NLC. And the TUC will send for them in order to be on the same page as people fighting the same objective. They joined the meeting, as the session which government has concluded. And now, rather than listing out A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, that of the TUC was added, including the list, with the TUC. So if you look at all these items that I mentioned, were discussed by the NLC, and then we'll have to harmonize it with the list with the TUC. I don't think there's any ambiguity about that. Because if NLC didn't present anything, the other list wouldn't be there and the list presented by the TUC.
All right, so let me come to you, Comrade Festus. I'm looking at your own demands here. You segment them into immediate implementation, medium term, and I think I'm trying to see if there's anything for, okay, they're just immediate and medium term. So looking at number 1 on the list, you're asking status quo ante of PMS pump price should be maintained while discussion continues. That hasn't been done at all.
Yes. So when we met at the neck level of TUC, there were different options. So the options were, okay, 1, should we stall the negotiation or discussion and ask government to return the pump price before we continue discussion? So when we had that conversation, so there were different opinions. Some people argued that if we let's assume government today return back the pump price to say that, okay, they want to have discussion for the next 1 month till the end of June. So the argument was that what is going to happen, that marketers are going to hoard, that the same workers and the same Nigerians that we are pushing, or rather we are wanting to protect, are the same people that will bear the brunt. 1, they will pay even much more higher price, and secondly, there will be long queues across the fuel stations. So it now came that, okay, while we are insisting that you return back, but we should still continue the conversation and the discussion. So that was the resolution that came from the TUC's neck. So for us, we have insisted that let them go back. But beyond that as well, even on the table, before we commence any conversation, that is the first thing we discuss. And we make them understand the reason why they could go back. That if they go back, they could also, at the end of the day, they have the mercenary and the instrumentality of office to be able to push it through. So but beyond that argument, we will now go into some other discussions. Like, for example, okay, you asked a question to my colleague earlier. I mean, it's very clear. The demands are all, they're literally the same. I mean, we're talking about what can we do for the working class, both in private sector, the public sector, what can be done to the vulnerable Nigerians. The demand are the same. So I don't think labor demand differs in any way. So if you look at what was put out there, it's practically the same. So coming down to that, beyond that they should return back, that we have insisted. But we now also went on to have other conversations. That was what was done on Sunday, by going through the list one after the other. And topmost of them was the salary and wage increment. Then beyond that, we went into other areas. Yeah.
But does it mean, number one, no longer valid, or what? You just forget about that one and move on to the other ones?
I know. If you see what is that number one, it was qualified. Why discussion continued? So what that means is that we did not say that you must do number one before you go to number two, because at times you could say status quo ante must be maintained before discussion continues. But the resolution, if you look at the communique that came out from our neck, it was status quo ante should be maintained while discussion continue, not before discussion will continue. So for us, we are insisting on that. So the fact that we are insisting on that, we are not stirring the discussion and negotiation at all.
You know, I find it, because while you were explaining what number one was, I mean, what your demand was for number one, you also mentioned the fact that there were differing stances by members of your neck. Some, they already looked at the consequence, what the possible consequence of insisting on number one will be. And so sometimes you have to ask if Labour, really thinks through all of. Some people say, well, this is a shopping list, and you now find that that's why they call it negotiations, right? But when you have something as crucial as number one, saying status quo ante or PMS pump price should be maintained, and you already know that this could be the possible consequence of that particular demand, is Labour sometimes realistic with the demands that they make?
Yes. So yes. Again, when you discuss, it's not actually. These things are not easy solutions. You don't just put things there that you think that at the end of the day, okay, let government just pick item 1, 2, and 3. So it's holistic. It's a basket. So when you make some demand, you also need to pressure government. You will not just go there and at the end of the day, for example, somebody was asking me the issue of minimum wage. Okay, you just go there and say, okay, government, move it from 30,000 to 40,000. These are not just easy solutions. So even when you understand, government will make an argument from their end. Labour will make an argument, but it is also the responsibility of government to implement some certain things. For example, it is very easy for government to tell us, and some of our people too, they also realize that, okay, if you do that, there's going to be queues and all that across board. But if government is also sincere, and if government is serious, they have the police, they have the DSS, they have the security to also enforce some certain things. If you see at a time when there was a strike, you saw the way the DSS came out. But beyond that, we told the DSS, beyond just statement, you could go into these stations and get some things done. For example, if government comes out to any of these fuel stations and they say that they are holding products and they dispense those products, if they do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I will tell you that other stations will queue and they will start doing what is right. So government also need to implement some certain things as well.
Let me ask Comrade Jero, there are some who think your members, they're in these sectors almost in every area, and they have figures themselves. For instance, when government says we don't know how much PMS we consume, but probably we know how much we draw from the source, they want that. Labour can have those figures as well. Then challenge government, say, look, this is what this is. And if they say, look, we can't pay minimum wage, and Labour says they can't pay minimum wage, the governments will tell you, well, show us that we can pay some of these things. So is it that we're missing the point, or has Labour done this previously and we don't seem to get it? Explain that for us, if you will.
Well, I don't want to go into the issue of leadership, and then the workers and the people being led. I equally believe that even the media, has access, even by Freedom of Information Act, to get more information than a worker, probably one worker in the finance, who is a member, the one in operation, the one here, the one there. You see, if we take it, which is not true, that government has been spending all these trillions on subsidy and on and on, it is not at the level of the worker that these policy issues, that these transactions take place. That is the fact. That's the clear fact. And those who are supposed to know, those who are supposed to verify these problems up there, are not. Even when we come up with claims, proper claims, it is waived by the side. Before now, while this negotiation has been on, we have been asking, can you give us the list of those people you are paying subsidy to? Who are they? What are the companies? What are they doing? Or do you move even refined products from the creeks to maybe the headquarters, and then you put amount of it in terms of subsidy as being produced from abroad, and then you tell Nigerians that it's subsidy. Now, what happened if during Jonathan we were talking of 335,000 barrels, and then suddenly now we are talking of almost 70,000 barrels, in that order. So what led to this sharp increase? So all that is surrendered by, when I say corruption, and which needs to be investigated. It's not the worker that will investigate this. It's not the worker that is in control of DSS, police, EFCC, ICPC. So as a nation, we have to come together. We have to come out. Let this government not, waive aside the issue of subsidy, payment of subsidy or not payment of subsidy. It must be investigated. If you're in a hurry and you say subsidy is gone, there is something that is being hidden. Can we find out what has happened and those that are receiving this subsidy money?
All right, we'll go to break, but we'll return and then bring in our colleagues from Lagos as well in just a moment. Do stay with us.
Cavities. It hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out.
The Duchess International Hospital caters to every aspect of the family's health needs. A one-stop shop for maternity and child health services, emergency medicine and critical care, medical and surgical subspecialties, dental and eye care, and a range of other subspecialties and services, all available at a single location right here in the heart of Ikeja. And it really doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket using your HMO or private insurance. We focus completely on providing that world-class affordable healthcare for all the family at all times.
Oh boy, open, no, it's me, JJ.
My brother, how far now?
Bros, is it true that the price of petrol has gone up again? Food and electricity are expensive. Now I'm hearing that fuel too has increased.
Why now? JJ, don't let anybody confuse you, please. The regulation of the price of petrol means the market is now open for healthy competition. The price could go up or down. It all depends on the market forces.
The price will still go up again?
Not like that. The federal government spends over 400 billion naira monthly on fuel subsidy. And with this deregulation, that money will be used for other important things like infrastructure and education. This competition will reduce the price in the long run.
Are you serious?
Yes, now. You see how SIM cards are now affordable to all? That's how petrol will be too. NMDPRA will not allow Nigerians to be exploited unjustly. Now, go out there and spread the good news.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA.
Yes, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We still have leaders of organized labor on the program. Comrade Festus Osifo, President, Trade Union Congress, and Comrade Joe Ajaero, President of the NLC. And we're still looking at the matter on the front burner at the moment, subsidy removal and the consequences. Let me start with you, Comrade Ajaero. I wonder if you've seen the papers today. They're awash with stories about labor selling out. And in the past 2 days, politicians have been tackling labor of having started off on the wrong footing because NLC had endorsed the presidential candidate ahead of the elections, and therefore they're negotiating from a very faulty position. Also, you presented strong positions at the beginning of this negotiation, stating that NLC was going to go on a nationwide strike, and in fact demanding a probe of the subsidy regime. I wonder what your response would be, to these issues, particularly surrounding the NLC.
Well, I wouldn't know whether these issues are informed issues. It is glaring to everybody in Nigeria that Labour Party is owned by the NLC. Owned by the NLC. And no leader of NLC can deny that, and Labour Party all over the world is formed and owned by the trade union movement all over. Nigeria is no exception. So that's not the issue. But even when this issue of fuel subsidy was analyzed by various political presidential candidates, the NLC was clear, and I could remember, stating it on this same channel, that if the Labour Party candidate goes into that, he will even have a double punishment from the Labour movement, because that runs counter, to our charter of demand that was given to him and the ideology for which the Labour Party was formed. That is clear. So if anybody is saying that because of that, Labour Party, NLC is standing on the wrong footing. Since 2003, when the Labour Party was formed, on and on and on, we have remained on that trajectory. And nothing, I repeat, by tomorrow, NLC will still, support the Labour Party, which it formed, can't abandon it. But that doesn't mean that NLC is not made up of people from other political parties. I can give you an example that my colleague as deputy president with me is now the governor of Kebbi State under the APC. We all rallied around him. Anything level, we work with it. So that one is clear. On other analysis on what we said when this happened, if you check from the beginning of this history of fuel subsidy, that has been NLC position. This is not a new NLC. Adam Soshomole did not deviate from this, on this issue of subsidy. Abdulhamid Umar did not. Ayuba Waba did not. Now the approach this time around, in terms of finding a lasting solution from us, is what I can say we brought a new dimension to it. Now we have been talking about the prices from Adam Soshomole to date. 20,000, when they increase it to 200, we negotiate and maybe get 180. When they negotiate it 300. But this time around, we say, is this their headache? Is that there is subsidy? They are subsidizing with 2 naira, tomorrow is 10 naira, tomorrow is 100 naira, you can't get it. We have to work on an alternative to this. And that was why, before now, we looked at the issue of CNG from the year 2000, and which we felt is a viable alternative and it's an alternative for the masses. Because somebody was talking about that.
Comrade Jerry, before you begin to talk about the CNG, your affiliation with the Labour Party compels many to begin to ask whether in your strong advocacy, initially for a strike and also for a probe of the subsidy regime, whether you were being sponsored by your presidential candidate, to toe that line. And of course, there are other more compelling questions, which is at the twilight of the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. Hold on, pardon me. When Nigerians suffered greatly beneath the weight of the Naira redesign policy, why NLC did not call for a nationwide strike, why in fact it did not embark on a nationwide strike to protest that policy?
Well, maybe the people are not current. When I came on board as NLC president, we gave the central bank 1 week. And anybody living in this country, even a beggar on the street, will tell you what happened. That was why Nigerians are benefiting from it. They didn't wait for that 1 week. They rushed to the office, and we compelled them to work on Saturday and Sunday. And that's the Naira you are seeing everywhere. I want an informed, position by those people making that allegation. On the issue of our being, even the Labour Party candidate was talking of, subsidy removal, although the mode may be different. And we said, if you do it, you hear us. So the idea of the fact that we formed a Labour Party, doesn't mean that if Labour Party does anything wrong. And it's an insult, let me repeat it, for whosoever must have said this, to say that the Labour Party is not dictating for NLC that formed it. That's the worst insult anybody can say. So if people are going to cheap blackmail, it should not be such. We determine, what happens in Labour Party to a large extent. So please, I think we can go into clear, classical analysis, not to turn things up and down. Who is the Labour Party and their candidates to tell NLC what to do? What we are doing now, has it not been consistent with what we have been doing on the issue of fuel subsidy? So please, let's go into this matter without blackmail.
All right, Comrade Jerry, let me come to you very quickly, Mr. Sifo. We've been talking about, the subsidy removal before you came on board in this segment. And, at the heart of the conversation was the lack of communication from the administration. But more importantly is, what is being communicated. And I wonder what you're gleaning in your continued negotiations with the government, which is, what is available in the first place. How honest has government been? Or the government has said that what's on your list is not impracticable. But we know that this administration has inherited over 70 trillion naira in debt. And top on your list is a demand that the minimum wage be increased from 30,000 naira to 200,000 naira. How practical is this in the light of what is available in government coffers? And of course, there's also that concern, that Labour's representation only covers about 10% of the workforce.
Yes. No, I think for us, we clearly believe that what we have demanded is reasonable. But when you are going to make demands, you don't just start from the final point. It doesn't work like that. So how did we arrive at about that 200,000 naira? Because if you look at, as at when the last minimum wage was negotiated, as at then, what was the value in terms of dollar term? It was something around $3 per day. So if you compute that $3 per day, you use the current value of dollar in the parallel market. So you are going to have 3 times about 30 times about 760. So that will take you to a particular value, maybe something around 70,000 naira. But you also know that this current administration is pushing for a unification of exchange rate. What that may mean is that the exchange rate officially would likely go up again. So when that goes up and government does not have the effects to meet the demand of the import obligations, what is going to happen in that regard is that it may also push the parallel market forward. And what we pay today, literally, it as a result of a value of of the exchange rate at the parallel market. So clearly, when that happens, even if today, if the realistic compared to where we were as at 2019, it's supposed to be around 70,000 naira today. But if you look at where it's going to be between now and the next 3-4 months, if what the president said during his inaugural speech that they want to unify exchange rate, because you know in Nigeria, what will likely happen is that the official rate will most likely go up. That will drive forward the parallel market rate. So what that means is that that value is that 70,000 will be further watered down. So when you now compute that, you'll be getting over 100,000 plus. So there were some scientific thoughts that went into that, but that was our demand. So let government come, we will prove it to them on the table why we think that the demand is reasonable. Again, governance is not a tea party. Governance is not something that is easy. You know, government is not just about you coming in, sharing federal allocation, then at the end of the month, you collect few taxes here and there, and you go to bed. If you cannot meet your obligations, you go and collect loan. That is not the function of governance. You must put on your thinking cap. You must think beyond your extraordinary. That is why in St. Klein, what is normally done, people that occupy those positions are people that can think, not just you sit down and you, I mean, there's no easy solution. So for us, we think that when they come to the table, we will prove it to them why we think this is realistic and this can be done. Yes, there's another argument that says that even the 30,000 naira, some states are not implementing it today. Clearly, they have told us that when subsidy is removed, that a lot of funds will be made available. So it's now also left for us in the labor movement to compel every single state and even the private sector to do the needful. But coming to the second half of your question, as I said that the demand is catering for one side of, I mean, just for the organized workers. I know there are some certain things there that cut beyond that. If you look at the demand that we submitted, like as alluded to by my colleague, explicitly clear on the issue relating to CNG. If that is faithfully implemented, it cuts beyond the working class. It goes around even to the people all across different strata of the Nigerian society. Well, if you also look at what we put there, things about mass housing. If you look at what we put there, things about energy. Energy cut across the working class. It cut across board. Well, things about the reduction in the cost of governance.
Allow me to butt in for a bit because we are running out of time, and I'd like you to take this very quickly, you and yourself and Mr. Comrade Ajero. Well, you spoke about the CNG program of government. You know, the question a number of people would ask is why it hasn't taken off. It's 2 years old already, and I remember it was even in 2020 that the whole idea was initiated under the economic recovery program of the previous government at the time. So one wonders, from your own understanding, what stalled it then? And if there is going to be a review, what is going to be done differently to ensure that it's not stopped? Please speak in the line of the fact that this project will not be executed by the federal government, but by members of your association.
Yes, you know, now that we are entering the other phase earlier, we were discussing that before now, but at the time, you know, the government, they came about, the former Minister of State, talking about the gas expansion program. I mean, they brought in the CNG, and it was a conversation that we were having. But at the time, government abdicated. They abdicated because they said they were not really ready as at then to remove subsidy. So if you remember the pronouncement of the president as at then that the subsidy will remain. So they did not come for discussion. We pushed them and we pushed them for us to sit down and look at this framework. Yeah, even an agreement that we signed as at then, they failed to implement. But this time around, the difference between then and now is that if you look at that communique that was signed, it was written that the labor centers are going to be involved. And that involvement of labor center, we must compel them to do what is right. Because if tomorrow, for example, we sign the memorandum of understanding on the way forward. It is our responsibility to ensure that from day one, they must implement. Because if they don't implement, I think they will have the entire Nigerian class to contend with. Okay. Because they've given several reasons why in the past they were not
would be interesting, Mr. Sifo, to really see how Labour will take that on, because we don't want to have to come back to this conversation again. Mr. Jero, just before we go, part of that conversation involved a review of the World Bank financed cash transfer scheme and proposed inclusion of low-income earners in the program. The question that comes is, World Bank again? Is it anything to do with the $800 million that the previous government was talking about? Another loan, or what exactly is that about? Help Nigerians understand so they can agree with Labour.
Well, this program is not the program of the Labour centers, but it is that same 800 million they procured from World Bank.
So we are still going to take that loan?
I think they must have collected the loan. So it is that loan they have collected, and while we try to, see what we can do with it, including all these programs, the government team insisted that this money is for maybe their normal sharing. Now, we go back to school with them to say, okay, you don't have the statistics. You don't have the data. The people you are paying, are not the right people. And you can't pay people 5,000. So it is entirely a new thing in our engagement with them. Because, you pay people, you don't know their names, you don't know their account numbers, you don't know their details. So this is an exercise that must start afresh. And in that agreement, we widened it. Because you can't say 50 million Nigerians are the poorest of the poor. When the National Bureau of Statistics have said 133 million people are multidimensionally poor. So we have to widen it. We have to think of things that could make sense. Not sharing 5,000 to people that are unknown. So it's going to be a taxi one. It's going to be one that we have to start afresh. If it must be credible, if Nigerians must believe in it, if it will not be the same process of sharing money to unknown faces or diverting the money. So that's not going to be an easy task.
Okay, Commander Sifo, what is next now? Is there a timeline with government within which some of these things have got to happen, or will negotiation continue in perpetuity, or what?
Yes, so that's the plan. So when we meet on the 19th, even before that 19th, there will be some other discussions going on for us to understand their thinking and to narrow down to, because they certainly will not come and say, all your demands, we accept them 100%. So, but when we now meet, we are going to define each of those items, and a timeline will now be put on them. So from the 19th, after the meeting of 19th, the timeline on each of these items are going to be revealed.
All right, Comrade Joe, just as we round up, civil society put up a statement, and they say, this fight is beyond the NLC and TUC, as they only represent an infinitesimal percentage of Nigerian working people, while the vast majority of the people currently bearing the burden and brunt of this scenario are in civil society and the private sector. And if you look at the list of demands put out there, where you talk about number 4, tax holiday for employees in both government and private sector that earn less than 200,000 naira or 500 USD monthly. Number 5, PMS allowance be introduced for those earning between 200,000 and 500,000 naira or 500 USD to 1,200. And they just thought, what about the pensioners, those who are artisans? Where do they fall in all of these demands?
In as much as I will not disclose that a list of demands, since it was provided by my colleagues. Those demands are genuine. And I want to agree with the civil society, that they are separate from the trade unions. They are separate from the labor center. And there are instances where the civil society has moved on, like during the Abacha regime when NLC was dissolved. I equally say during 1988, when some of us were students, under the NANS, we came out to challenge that government that led to formation of DFRI and others, and which he called civilian coup, and he created 1 million jobs. The civil society can on their own move to the street the civil society can on their own take action, if they feel that what we have done now is not representative of their demands. Principally, the NLC, the TUC have been carrying the burden of not just the workers, but the civil society, the private sector, and everybody. So they could play a complementary role now that we are negotiating. If they disagree with us, they are not under any compulsion, to remain on what is happening. What happened affects everybody, even the judges that gave that judgment. It affects everyone. So I think the civil society can take it further from where Labour stopped.
All right, just one more thing, Comrade Osifo, and quickly, if you can. When you list all of this and say they should implement this and that with this class of people, what templates do you expect government to use if they were to put in place any such thing called palliatives?
What templates?
In terms of the data, how would you know who is what? How would they get several people or the right people to benefit from this?
Yes, that is a question. If you listen to what the NLC president said, it was so apt because part of when he said he wanted to send 5,000 to the vulnerable Nigerians, we told them, no, you can't just be sending money to people. At the end of the day, we don't know those that you are sending the money to, and where are the data? The ones you've done before, under the conditional cash transfer, where are the people you send the money to? You heard when he was saying about where are their account numbers, where are their BVNs? So these things are the things that we must interrogate, not just to allow them to continue business as usual.
All right, well, thank you for coming on, Comrade Festus Osifo is the president of Trade Union Congress and Pengasin, as well as Comrade Joe Ajero, president of Nigeria Labour Congress. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
A lot of messages, Chamberlain. I was about to start. Anyway, never mind what I was about to do. Professor Enakina says, fuel subsidies, a rogue regime of corruption that is responsible for the dearth and paucity of funds to invest in economic diversification and deregulation. Subsidy removal will free funds for development of infrastructure, fund affordable post-secondary education, create a guaranteed mortgage sector tied to a single-digit interest rate on borrowing, curtail double-digit inflation. He says we must insist on total transparency on the implementation of PIB that insists on privatization of the sector. We must demand monthly accountability of all our income and expenditure, especially now we operate TSA, to quell this distrust between government and the governed.
Well, look at this one from Wale Olayinka. It's an email, and he says about removal of subsidy. Obviously, the government has quickly acted on the easiest but painful solution in their desperation to increase revenue and block revenue leakages. There are so many ways the country loses revenue. A, crude theft. No one is looking at blocking this leakage, which is far more than subsidy cost. B, Oronsanye's report on MDAs. Implement this to the letter and the country saves 25% of its costs. C, national budgeting padding. If I'm the president, the national budget, after passing through the Budget Office and National Assembly, will be given to the 5 big accounting firms in the country to pick out duplicated projects, padded items to reduce it. D, tax/import waivers, pioneer status given to big companies and individuals that are not good for the economy. The common people should not be made to pay for the inefficiencies of government agencies, as this policy affects everybody, not only civil servants, but the government is planning to, he says, ameliorate its effects. That's from Wale Olayinka.
Well, we see your mails. Well, we'll see your mails, your tweets rather, Festus Akimboiwa and Olagunju Oladile. Thank you so much and keep writing in. And that's it on the program today. I am Bukola Koka. I'm Ayo Makinde. There's a lot more on Twitter if you want to enjoy them. Have a wonderful day.
Goodbye, I'm Alpelgo Yusuf.
I'm Chamberlain, so have a good day.
It's a sign of the times. A reflection of conversations from the streets to the halls.
Interesting collection you have here. Thank you.
That get to the walls. If they could talk, see and hear the limitless creative.
So I think the moral of it is that when you make a vow, you must ensure that you fulfill it.
On Art House.
Top of the morning to you and a warm welcome to our coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I am Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky calls the bursting of the Kakhovka Dam an environmental bomb of mass destruction. Countries react to Kakhovka Dam burst as the U.S. admits not knowing what happened. Plus, security analysts say expect more attacks on critical infrastructure after Ukraine dam. Many thanks for joining us. President Vladimir Zelensky has described the burst